Oh, hi! This week, I've made maybe the dumbest, but also maybe the best thing I've ever sewn. I did my own spin on some Juicy Couture garb. For some context, yes, I came of age in the mid-2000s, so I saw Juicy written on a lot of stretch velour asses, and it was never my thing, but recently, Joann Fabrics came out with a Juicy Couture line, like the stretch velour that they used to make those tracksuits is available at the store. Now, I didn't care about getting that precise fabric because A, I don't think it would be a fabric I'd actually want to touch, and B, I'm not like gung-ho in support of this brand or anything. So I did manage to find a scrap of baby pink stretch fleece as well as a bunch of rhinestones, like almost exactly the amount of rhinestones I needed because I'm a hoarder and this is just what happens. I do think I initially had these rhinestones for some Elton John glasses I was going to make when I was doing a bunch of Rocket Man themed projects. Had to have been 2019. And then the fleece was left over from experimenting with some Howl's Moving Castle cardigan stuff. And I do need to find more of the fabric I decided to go with for those cardigans because I'm starting to do them made to order for my Etsy shop. So I want to make sure I like have some on standby. Plus then I can make some ahead of time for the comic book convention I'm doing in September. But anyway, let's not immediately derail. I don't personally want a bedazzled bottom. I was thinking, what would be a fun way to interpret this? And since I did my second pattern collection video last week, I showed the dog snuggie that I took apart. So that was fresh on my radar when, of course, when Joann's first sent out that email, I just deleted it and moved on. But then I'm in a Fiber Arts Discord group and someone posted about it and was like, I don't know how I feel about this collaboration. Just happened to be the correct timing with me thinking about the dog snuggie and Evie mentioning that. A very chaotic idea emerged out of my brain, which was, let's make a little outfit for Bert, huh? And I just felt a little weird about writing Juicy to go above my dog's butt, and I literally tried to name him Stink when we first got him, so we went with a slightly different phrase. So Current Me has finished the garment, but I have not tried it on Bert. I hope he tolerates it, but we'll see together at the end of the video how this ends up working. But as far as creating the garment, here's what you need. Now, my dog is a mini dachshund. He weighs less than 12 pounds, so it didn't use up a lot of fabric. I think maybe like 1/8 of a yard or something. And I managed to find some pretty closely matching thread to mount into my sewing machine. The other basic accoutrement, scissors. I don't think I needed any pins for this. I did end up using some Velcro, but I also considered using snaps. So I thought that would be a pretty easy approach. And I've used those for dog coats before and it's worked out pretty well. I wasn't sure what to use for adhering the rhinestones to the actual fabric because I've never bedazzled anything before. I didn't want to do hot glue. I figured that'd be kind of messy. Double stick tape, I would have to like cut out all these little dots and it was going to be a mess and not work out well, I don't think. And these weren't like the sticky rhinestones. I know sometimes they like come on a sheet. That certainly would have made my life easier. I got a very helpful suggestion from Grant of Crafty Grant. I'll put a link to their channel below. But they recommended E6000, which somehow in my whole crafting career, I have never actually used. And the 2-ounce tube that I got was actually less expensive than I thought it was going to be for how versatile that product is. Making the stencil was kind of its own animal, and I will explain the steps that I did to make it, but I'm sure there are so many other ways to have gone about it. So, you know, I used a computer and some paper and then a hole punch and a fabric pen. For actual assembly, as I said, I have this old dog snuggie, and in the 4 years, actually exactly 4 years, this week is the 4-year anniversary of us adopting Bert, my sweet little menace. And I've never, actually, I do think I tried making him something with it, but the fabric I used wasn't stretchy. I think I tried making him little Hogwarts robes. And again, always and forever fuck turfs, so it's not a project I'm going to repeat. It helped me learn what not to do for this project. So there's the main coat piece, and it has almost like a little bib shape that overlaps in the front. There are 2 straps that go underneath, And then there are the pieces for the hood. You can certainly very easily omit the hood section to this and just have it as a little coat. You could get something close to this shape, just measure from your dog's neck down to where you want the coat to end, and then measure around to their tummy. And then likewise, measure around from the back of the neck to where you would have the front straps overlap each other. I honestly probably overcomplicated it by tracing all this. Making my own pattern likely would have been easier. When I was cutting the pieces out, I made sure to add some like hem allowance. This fabric is not going to fray, so you don't have to worry about that, especially on the rounded corners at the bottom. It was a little tricky getting the hem to lay nicely. I'm sure if I steamed this it'd be okay, but I was nervous about ironing it because I didn't want it to lose any of its fluffiness, so Bert's not gonna mind if there's a little bit of like that lettuce edge thing happening. And then yeah, once I had copied all of these pieces, the hood pattern pieces confused me, where if I was making this again, I wouldn't have it in 4 sections, I would just have it in 2. And actually, I wonder if there's a way for me to like scan this in to share with y'all. Let me know if that's something anybody cares about. So before I started attaching pieces together, I did hem any of the edges that would otherwise stay raw and weren't getting attached to something else. Then when I did assemble things, because it's thicker fabric and I wasn't serging any of this, I did top stitch the seam allowance to one side just to keep the edges neater. And because I took this apart so long ago, I was really flying blind as far as putting this together. I had general guesses as far as like, I assume the hood gets attached along the collar line and that the tabs get attached underneath the tummy. So hopefully the positioning of everything is okay. Again, we'll find out once we do a little try on. And yeah, so I assembled the 4 pieces of the hood and I kind of like basted that in place. And then I basted the little tummy tabs on either side and just made sure everything was even. I did notch a couple of things and like find center points just to line up things as much as I could. I finished those seams and like I said, kind of top stitched the seam allowance to one side as I was hemming the rest of that edge. Where the hood was getting attached, it didn't go along the entire collar, so it was gonna have to get attached first and then the whole thing hemmed to look how I wanted it to. And then yeah, same applied for the tabs as I basted them in place and then did the full stitching when I went over that edge to hem the rest of it. I feel like I'm not verbally explaining that well, but hopefully you're seeing what I'm talking about. And honestly, this went together so quickly. I thought it was going to be more of a hassle or involve more finessing, and the only real trouble I had was hemming those curves, and I definitely have ways I could remedy it at least somewhat, and I'm just not going to bother. So sorry if you're disappointed in me for not putting that little bit more effort in. But I was just really excited to get to the stencil part. So the way I did this is I just Googled what the Juicy Couture font was, and the recommendation I got from a couple different places was Old London font. I found a font generator. I typed Stinky because I am dubbing this garment, I almost said collection. I suppose we could go deeper into this rabbit hole, but we're calling it Stinky Couture. I put it into my drawing program, added another layer above that, and took a regular marker tool. I think this is technically the Millie pen from Clip Studio Paint, I think is the program it's called. And I just tried to find all the points that I would put a rhinestone and like test to make sure it didn't look too cluttered and not too spaced out. The upside of having this as a separate layer is I could hide the text underneath and see if I could tell what the fuck it said. This actually took quite a while. And something I also had to double check is that there weren't more dots than I had rhinestones, where I had 2 packs of 90, meaning I had 180 points to work with. And I wanted to do a test run, so I'd need a couple spares, and then just if I dropped something or one got too messed up or whatever, just wanted to have some backups. So I counted everything out. I isolated each letter, counted how many dots there were, added that together, and I had enough wiggle room. Then I printed out the dot matrix. I know that's not what that means, but printed out my little dot stencil. I took a leather punching tool. I realized I probably could have like stuck this into my Cricut program and had it cut out all the dots for me. That probably would have been smarter, but alas, I was already deep into it, and it was a good thing to keep my hands busy while I was just relaxing and watching some YouTube videos, because I haven't even given myself time to do that kind of stuff. I've just been so go, go, go the past couple weeks, or lying in a pit of despair. It's kind of been one of the two extremes, but especially this past weekend, I feel like I let things kind of even out a little bit better. This was tedious and time consuming and just a very silly project, but it was very relaxing to work on, which just makes the whole thing funnier for what it is. Once I had all those holes punched, I also took an awl and like poked the paper out because the leather punch is getting dull. It was already rusted and old and only given to me because insurance covered a new one getting replaced at an old job I was at because there was flooding that happened, and that's part of why it's so rusty. So I was given like this junky one, and it's doing what it can, but those tools are really fucking expensive. I will have some hand cramps and just deal. I needed the holes to be small because what I ended up doing once I got the holes actually clear, also this was a really ideal way to go about this stencil making. As someone with very intense trypophobia, don't Google it. I don't want to talk about it. If you know, you know. But that is why I gave a little warning before this part, because it messed with me, because that's how sensitive I am to these things. Once I had all the holes cleared, I laid it over, you know, the bottom center part of the little coat. The OG sweatpants, it always said it just right over the ass. So yeah, I initially was gonna use chalk, but it almost immediately like rubbed off of the fabric, and I did want something that was gonna stay so that the stencil didn't get messed up and I didn't have to like redo it and then have overlap or like just have things be off kilter. So I just took a close-ish matching fabric marker. I do wish I had done something that was more temporary, where this is literally like meant for permanently writing on fabric. So there's a little bit of marker you can see underneath the bedazzling, and it's not the cleanest job, but also this was my first time bedazzling something anyway, so it was never going to be perfect, and that's okay. We're not here for perfection. We're here to just like have fun and let our brains shut off a little bit. But yeah, I went over each dot with a marker and took my time with that and made sure I wasn't like scooting the paper around. I did pin it in place in a couple spots and just tried to do as clean of a job as possible. I wanted to do a quick little test run, so I took a little bit of scrap that I had left over from the scrap that I started with for this whole project and just tested out gluing down some rhinestones. Oh, I also forgot another suggestion I had gotten. If it was hard to read with just the stones, just the dot stencil I had made, maybe taking some silver heat transfer vinyl, which I have left over from one of my Elton John projects, and then bedazzling like over top of it to make it really clear what it was saying. But I had a really hard time getting the heat transfer vinyl to stick to the fleece. I know the heat transfer vinyl doesn't stick to all fabrics, as I have been frustrated to find out in previous projects. I tried a bunch of different ways to go about that and I didn't like it. And also ironing on the fleece, even if I have a protective barrier between the iron surface and the fleece itself, it still like flattens it, and I want it to be on the plusher side because we're going for luxury here. But I just wasn't liking how that was looking. So that is why I went strictly with the rhinestones. I did the first little section, wanted to leave it and see how well the glue stuck. It seemed to be fine. So then last night, when I wasn't in the midst of battle and like rolling for my specific turn, I did a lot of bedazzling while I was playing D&D. And I have to say, doing mindless tasks like that while I'm involved in like an imaginary story that I kind of need to keep my brain in for a sustained amount of time, it really helps me not wander off somewhere else. It helps me like stay present. Hopefully it's not distracting, but I feel like I played better last night because I was doing that. It was great. And it took like 2 or 3 hours, maybe 2 hours, because using the E6000, I would put a little glob on some cardboard and then I'd take a toothpick where I'd smear a little bit of glue on the back of the rhinestone and then use a dry, clean toothpick to like scoot the rhinestone off the gluey toothpick, name of my new ska band, and then just like kind of press it into the fabric with the clean toothpick. And it seemed to be a decent system. I really had no concept of how long the E6000 was going to be workable, and it actually set up and got gummy a lot faster than I thought it would. So I had to keep doing like a little glob, do 2 or 3 rhinestones, and then have to do it again. And then yeah, that got us to where we are today. So I finished it last night. I let all the stones dry overnight, and I really hope that my dog will still talk to me after I put him in this. So without further ado, let's see how this looks on the little guy. That little goddamn maniac loved it so much. What a ham. I thought he'd be like, it's fine and like quietly tolerate it. No, he did what I like to call his Homer Simpson squirmies, where Homer is like spinning in circles on the floor of the living room. That's what Bert does when he's like having a good time. Okay, well, this has been a journey. Thank you for coming along for the ride. As always, a tremendously huge thank you to everybody over on Patreon. It is because of y'all I get to do this, and it's my favorite thing to do, and I so appreciate having folks to share it with. Thank you for letting me keep doing this. Speaking of being thankful for patrons, it's because of y'all I will be able to take next Friday off from posting a video. Not to say I won't be working on stuff because I have Etsy updates to do. I actually sold both of these bags over the weekend, which are some of my favorite things I've ever made, and I will be making more. Not the same. These are all going to be one of a kind because it involves so much fabric for so many different sections. So like, even if I use the same main panels, no two will be the same, which is kind of the fun of it though, right? It means a lot that the new thing I'm super excited about has also made other people excited enough that they want to own it themselves. And yeah, I'm gonna go give Bert some much needed snuggles for letting me exploit him, and I will see you back here in 2 Fridays. Thank you so much for hanging out. To mount? When have I ever used that word to describe placing it onto the machine? Anyway. Ugh, motherfucking mosquito.